laxity enforcement. Some of it comes from not having enough authority to do things. For example, perfect example, recalls. The American people often hear that a product has been recalled. I think the common usage of the term recall would suggest that if a product has been recalled, that FDA has or could go to the grocery store, take it off the shelves, and make sure that it doesn't wind up in your pantry. The reality is that FDA doesn't have the authority to force a company to remove a product from the shelves. This is all voluntary. The only product, there's one product that FDA could go into a grocery store and remove from the shelves, and that's infant formula. Not baby food, not the food in the jars, just formula. Everything else, peanuts, tomatoes, your processed foods, cereal, anything else that we hear about a recall, that's a company electing to do that voluntarily. That's one of the things we'd like to see changed. It shouldn't be up to a company to decide that they're going to agree with FDA. If their product is dangerous, FDA should have the authority to remove it from the marketplace.
Well, I had a constituent that had a meat supply place, and they found, I think it was salmonella, and he had a contract with the public schools, and he came to my office and asked me to plead with the agriculture department to say that it's impossible not to have an environment with a little bit of the salmonella.
Right.
And he wanted some kind of waiver to not have to bring it to the next level.
Yeah.
My heart was not really in it because I felt that ultimately there would be a lot of sick children.
Yeah.
But is there a level of bacteria that can just pass by?
Right. It depends on the bacteria. There are some where you're allowed to have a certain tolerance level, we call it. They vary by the bacteria, and it's highly scientific, beyond me to say exactly what those levels are. But there are other bacteria that are so dangerous that we have what's called a zero tolerance policy, where if that pathogen is found in a food product, it is considered adulterated and does not belong on the market. One of the most dangerous pathogens that we see in meat products is E. coli, and there have been, horror stories upon horror stories, particularly of children who are particularly susceptible to E. coli, who have suffered just grievous harm and death. And it's often because of improper cooking practices that we see a problem, but really whenever there's a product that's coming out of a meat plant, it needs to have just, almost an impeccable safety record, particularly if it's going to be sent to schools.
Now, I'm one that want to see the origin of the food.
Yes.
And in my mind, I think that the safest foods are produced right here in our country. Am I off track?
No, we support country of origin labeling and think that it's great to give consumers more information about where their food is coming from, in part because when we hear that there is a problem with a particular country, we have seen problems repeatedly from China, for example. A consumer should have the ability to make the decision that they are not going to buy products from that country. Now, as we said before, that's not a guarantee that your food is going to be safe. But by and large, the U.S. food safety system is one of the strongest in the world. And so if you are determined to buy an American product, you should be able to do that. And having country of origin labeling is just giving consumers more information, which is always a good thing.
Well, I'm one of these people that also want to wash the fruit like I'm washing dishes.
Yeah.
Does that help or hurt? Or is there any type of protection of fruits especially?
Yeah, it's hard. Some fruits it really does help to wash them and to wash them thoroughly. These are fruits where you're going to be eating kind of the entire thing, like a strawberry. But other things, it's unfortunate. One of the problems that we've seen a lot of is salmonella in cantaloupe. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to wash the surface of a cantaloupe. You're not going to have any luck getting all of the bacteria out of these nooks and crannies. And then as soon as you cut into it, you're taking whatever's on the outside, on the rind, and putting it right onto the inside. So that's the kind of product where we really need to see the farmers and the shippers following impeccable safety procedures, because there's nothing you can do once it arrives in your kitchen to make that safer. There are things that consumers can do regularly to minimize their risk, and we always recommend that they do those things, which we can certainly talk about. But there are things where consumers really need to know that the food that they purchased has already been produced safely and is something that they can rely on and know that it's a safe product because it's arrived to them in a form that they can't fix.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the things that we're always trying to remind consumers is make sure that you keep your raw meats separate from your raw produce items. For example, don't use the same cutting board to prepare your chicken breast that then you're going to use to cut your cantaloupe. There was a terrible story some years ago about a little girl, I believe it was in Texas at the Sizzler, who died from a contaminated cutting board. It was essentially a raw meat product that was contaminated with E. coli, was prepared on the same surface that later a watermelon was cut. So she was eating watermelon. She wasn't eating a high-risk product, but it was contaminated with the E. coli that was on the cutting board. So we like to remind consumers, use a different cutting board for your meat products than you're going to use for your produce and your fruit products. Wash your hands thoroughly during food preparation. Anytime that you're touching a raw item, a raw meat or poultry item, you need to make sure to wash your hands carefully. There are other things that consumers can do that range from the very detailed, like put your sponge in the dishwasher when you run the load and let that get kind of steamed out, things like that. One of the things that we're working on actually is some restaurant food safety, because all of the things that we do in our kitchens at home, restaurant kitchens should also be doing. The problem is that if they mess up, it's not just one family that's going to get sick, it could potentially be hundreds. And so that's a campaign that we're constantly working on, is to improve restaurant food safety. So many people in this country dine out, even in these kind of tough economic times. People are dining out as a special treat or a celebration, and so it's particularly important that food be prepared safely as well as deliciously so that they can really enjoy that evening.
Now, we have organic foods that no preservatives and all that. Is that safe? Actually, the organic label has no relationship to the safety of the food. If a consumer would like to choose organic because they prefer to have food that has no pesticides or has been produced in a certain way, they should absolutely do so. But they should not do so thinking that organic has any relationship to safety. Those are two separate items. There are no additional safety requirements to receive an organic label. So even if a product has been declared organic, that doesn't have any indication of whether it has been prepared in a safer manner. Similarly, consumers often eat kosher and halal products because they believe that those are safer. There is no relationship between the safety of a product that is prepared under the laws of koshering than a product that is not. That's, you can choose to eat those products, but it needs to be for a different reason than safety. Now, what about fruits like grapes, where you have a cluster? When you get the package home, you remove the plastic, whatever. What kind of cleansing do you recommend?
It's hard because short of a serious antibacterial rinse, which most people don't want to do at home, all you can really do is just rinse those grapes thoroughly with hot water. If you're really, really concerned, you can use some soap and make sure you get it all the way off before you consume it. But really, that's another one of those products. It's unfortunate that so many of these products are things that we need to make sure are arriving safely into homes because there's so little you can do. Tomatoes are something similar. The more consumers handle their tomatoes, they're notoriously soft, and they become, with more handling, they become less appetizing. And so that's something that needs to be safe coming at you from the farm so that you don't have to manipulate it too much at home and end up having a quality problem as you're trying to make it a safer product.
Well, being an old nurse, I learned a long time ago that you wash your chicken, so I usually make dishwater and wash my fruits in the dishwater and rinse them before I even put them in the refrigerator. Am I wasting my time, or is that something you recommend?